Why are so many people afraid of being alone? Why do we crave constant noise, endless distractions, and the approval of others? But let me tell you something. Today, aloneness is not a weakness, it is a weapon. Some of the greatest moments of power, revelation, and transformation in history happened when someone was alone. Moses was alone on the mountain when God gave him the commandments. Joseph was alone in a prison before he stepped into the palace. Jesus was alone in the wilderness before he stepped into his assignment. Being alone is where vision is born. What if I told you that your next level isn't found in a crowd but in your quiet moments? That the greatest discoveries in life don't happen when people surround you, but when you step into isolation with purpose, aloneness is where God refines you, prepares you, and strengthens you for your destiny. Let me tell you something. Before God reveals your assignment to the world, He reveals it to you in private. The problem with many people today is that they want public promotion without private preparation. They want a stage without a secret place. They want the reward without the refinement. But that's not how the kingdom works. Look at Moses. He was raised in Pharaoh's palace, surrounded by luxury, wealth, and influence. But God couldn't use him in that environment. He had to strip Moses of the noise, take him into the wilderness, and let him be alone for 40 years before he was ready to lead a nation. Alone in the desert, Moses didn't have the opinions of men, the distractions of Egypt, or the pressure of society. It was just him, the sheep, and God. And in that solitude, he learned how to lead. David was the same way. When Samuel anointed him king, he didn't go straight to the throne. He went back to the fields. While his brothers were in the army, David was alone with sheep, learning how to fight lions and bears. Do you see the pattern? God prepares leaders in isolation. When David finally stood before Goliath, he didn't need Saul's armor. Why? Because he had already won battles alone. Many of you are frustrated because you feel like you're in a season of isolation. Friends have walked away, opportunities have dried up, and you feel like God has forgotten you. But hear me, He hasn't forgotten you. He is preparing you, because what He is about to do in your life requires a level of maturity, wisdom, and strength that can only be developed in solitude. Jesus Himself, before He preached a single sermon, before He healed a single person, was led by the Spirit into the wilderness, not by accident, not because He was being punished, but because power is forged in private. 40 days of fasting, 40 days of testing, 40 days of being alone, and when He came out, He returned in the power of the Spirit. Stop running from your season of aloneness. Stop trying to escape the process. If God has pulled you away from people, it's because He wants to pull something greater out of you. Instead of complaining, start listening. Instead of fighting it, start embracing it. Because the next time people see you, you won't be the same. You will be stronger, wiser, and ready to step into what God has called you to do. Most people are addicted to approval. They measure their worth by how many friends they have, how many followers they gain, or how many people validate their decision. But let me tell you something. When you depend on people to define you, you give them permission to control you. And when people control you, you will never fulfill your God-given purpose. Look at Jesus. He never asked for permission to be who He was called to be. He didn't wait for the Pharisees to approve His assignment. He didn't need a crowd to confirm His identity. When He stood in the synagogue and declared, "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me," Luke 4:18, He spoke with authority because He already knew who He was. He didn't need human validation because He had divine confirmation. Some of you are delaying your destiny because you're waiting for people to clap for you. But what if they never do? What if they never support you? What if they never understand you? Will you abandon your calling just because they don't approve? If you need people's applause to start, you will crumble under their criticism. If you need people to agree before you obey, you'll never move when God says go. Elijah learned this lesson in the cave. After calling down fire from heaven, after standing boldly against the prophets of Baal, he found himself alone, isolated and discouraged. He thought God's power was in the noise, in the fire, in the whirlwind, but it was in the still, small voice. That means sometimes God separates you from people so that you can hear him clearly. If you're too surrounded by opinions, you will miss revelation. If you're too connected to the crowd, you will ignore the call. There are some seasons where God will pull you away, not because he's punishing you, but because he's purifying you. He's cutting off the voices that distort your purpose. He's breaking your dependency on external validation so that when you rise with confidence. Joseph didn't need his brothers to believe in his dream for it to come to pass. Daniel didn't need Babylon to agree with his convictions. Paul didn't need approval from the religious leaders to preach the gospel. Stop waiting for people to see what God already told you. Stop measuring your calling by human acceptance. Because when God calls you, he equips you. When he chooses you, he empowers you. And when he elevates you, no man can bring you down. Crowds create confusion, but solitude creates clarity. Too many people are lost, not because they lack potential, but because they are surrounded by too many voices. They don't know what God is saying because they are too busy listening to the opinions of men. They don't know their purpose because they are trying to live up to the expectations of others. But if you want to hear God clearly, if you want to see your vision clearly, you must be willing to step away from the noise. Jesus understood this principle. That is why, before every major decision, he withdrew to a quiet place. Before choosing his disciples, he spent the night alone in prayer. Before going to the cross, he went to Gethsemane alone. Why? Because clarity is found in stillness, not in chaos. You cannot see your future when you are distracted by the present. You cannot hear divine direction when you are surrounded by earthly noise. That is why some of you are confused, not because God is silent, but because you are too surrounded to hear him. When Abraham separated from Lot, God spoke. When Moses turned aside to see the burning bush, God called his name. When Jacob was left alone, he wrestled with God and was transformed. Every major shift in destiny happens in a moment of solitude. Some of you are wondering why your next step isn't clear, why your vision seems clouded, why your purpose feels distant. Could it be that you are too connected to people who are distorting your focus? Could it be that God is waiting for you to step away so he can reveal what's next? When an eagle is ready to soar to a new height, it doesn't fly with a crowd. It ascends alone. It goes higher where the air is thinner, where other birds cannot follow. That is the difference between those who walk in purpose and those who are led by opinion. Some people never fulfill their destiny because they refuse to leave the crowd. But listen, if you need the crowd to move, you will never see clearly. If you need confirmation from people, you will miss revelation from God. Step away. Shut out the noise. Get alone with God. Because the moment you separate yourself, clarity will come. The moment you silence distractions, direction will come. And when you emerge from that place, you will no longer walk in confusion, but in confidence, knowing exactly where God is leading you. If you cannot stand alone, you are not ready to stand at all. Strength is not developed in comfort. It is built in solitude. The greatest men and women in history did not become strong because life was easy. They became strong because they learned how to endure, how to fight, how to overcome alone. Too many people today are weak, not because they lack potential, but because they have never developed inner strength. They depend on people to encourage them, to affirm them, to support them. But what happens when no one is there? What happens when the applause stops, when the friends leave, when the help disappears? If your strength is dependent on others, you have no strength at all. Look at David. When he returned to Ziklag and found the city burned, his wives and children taken, and his own men ready to stone him, he had no one to turn to, no crowd, no encouragers, no support system. But the Bible says David encouraged himself in the Lord. 1 Samuel 36. That is the difference between those who collapse under pressure and those who rise in adversity. Strong people don't wait for external encouragement. They build internal strength. They don't depend on others to push them forward. They push themselves. Some of you are frustrated because you feel abandoned. You feel like no one is supporting you. No one understands you. No one is standing with you. But what if God is allowing this season to teach you how to stand on your own? What if He is training you, strengthening you, preparing you to rely on Him and not man? Because if you need people to keep you strong, then you will always be weak. An eagle does not wait for another bird to teach it how to fly. When the time comes, it spreads its wings and soars on its own. That is how strength is developed. By learning to rise, even when no one is watching, even when no one is helping, even when no one is applauding. The champions of life are not those who had the most support, but those who refused to fall even when they were alone. Stop looking for someone to hold you up. Stop depending on others to keep you strong. Learn to stand. Learn to fight. Learn to endure. Because when the storm comes, those who have built their strength in solitude will be the only ones left standing. Before God promotes you, He isolates you. Before He lifts you up, He sets you apart. The problem with many people today is that they want elevation without separation. They want to be great, but they don't want to leave their comfort zone. They want to step into destiny, but they don't want to step away from distractions. But hear me, God never raises a person in the middle of a crowd. He first pulls them away, refines them, and then releases them into their assignment. Joseph had a dream of greatness, but before he could step into the palace, he had to go through a season of isolation. He was thrown into a pit alone, sold into slavery alone, locked in a prison alone. Why? Because separation comes before elevation. If Joseph had stayed comfortable in his father's house, he never would have become a ruler in Egypt. God had to strip him from familiarity, remove him from his brothers, and place him in solitude so he could grow into the leader he was called to be. Some of you are wondering why God has pulled certain people out of your life. You're asking, why did they leave? Why did that relationship end? Why am I losing friends? But what if God is separating you for something greater? What if He is cutting off the weights that are slowing you down? What if the very people you're crying over are the ones holding you back from the next level? Look at Paul. Before he became the apostle who wrote most of the New Testament, God took him into the wilderness of Arabia for 3 years. Galatians 1:17-18. Not to punish him, but to prepare him. He wasn't ready to preach yet. He needed time away to be trained, to be transformed, to be filled with revelation. The world did not hear about Paul until he first went through a season of divine separation. Even Jesus, before he began his ministry, before he performed miracles, before he taught in the synagogues, was led into the wilderness for 40 days. Alone, no disciples, no followers, no crowds. Because even the Son of God had to go through a season of separation before stepping into his full assignment. Stop fighting your isolation. Stop trying to hold on to what God is cutting off. If He is separating you, it means He is getting ready to elevate you. Some people cannot go where you are going. Some relationships cannot handle your next level. Some environments cannot support the vision inside you. Let them go. Embrace the separation. Because when God is done with you, you won't just rise, you will soar. You cannot change the world if the world still controls you. True power is not found in crowds, opinions, or applause. It is found in the one who has mastered the art of standing alone. Look at history. Every person who made a lasting impact was first set apart. They had to break away from what was normal, reject what was expected, and choose a path that few dared to walk. Jesus stood alone before Pilate. He stood alone before the Pharisees. He stood alone on the cross. And yet, in that aloneness, he accomplished the greatest victory in human history. Because power is not measured by how many people surround you. It is measured by how willing you are to stand firm when everyone else walks away. Some of you are waiting for support before you step into your calling. You are waiting for people to agree, to understand, to validate what God has already spoken to you. But hear me. You will never fulfill your purpose if you need permission to obey God. If you need the approval of men, you will never walk in the authority of the kingdom. If you are afraid to stand alone, you are not ready for true power. Look at Daniel. He was surrounded by a system that wanted to control him, shape him, silence him. But he refused to bow. He refused to compromise. Even when he was thrown into the lion's den, he stood alone. And because he stood alone, God stood with him. That is the secret. When you stand for God, He stands for you. When you refuse to bow to fear, to pressure, to opinions, heaven backs you up. Elijah stood alone on Mount Carmel, surrounded by hundreds of false prophets. He did not waver. Why? Because he understood that one man with God is always the majority. The problem with many people today is that they want God's power but are afraid to stand apart. They want to be used by God but do not want to be different. But you cannot carry divine authority and still crave human acceptance. You cannot walk in kingdom power and still be afraid of people's opinions. This is your moment to decide, will you stand or will you blend in? Will you walk in the power of your calling or will you shrink back into the crowd? Those who are willing to stand alone are the ones who shape history. Those who refuse to compromise are the ones God uses mightily. If you want to be truly powerful, stop waiting for company. Embrace the call to stand alone. Some of you have been running from being alone because you think it means rejection. But what if it means redirection? What if the loneliness you feel is not abandonment, but an invitation to step into a new level of strength, vision, and power? This week I challenge you, embrace your alone moments. Turn off the distractions, shut out the noise, and listen to the voice of God. Because your next season is not waiting in the crowd, it's waiting in your solitude. Being alone is not a punishment, it is preparation. And those who embrace it will walk in a power that no man can take away.